There is a silent revolution that begins not with thunder or declarations, but with a withdrawal. A soft vanishing of one's presence from spaces where it was once so freely, so carelessly offered. And yet, in that quiet severance, when you stop being available, everything begins to tremble, to shift, to reveal its true nature. Carl Jung, the great cartographer of the soul's interior, hinted often at this unseen pivot. The moment when one no longer offers themselves on the altar of others' expectations, illusions, or projections. It is here, in the retraction of one's availability, that an entire cosmos hidden beneath social entanglements begins to pulse with life. Availability in this context is not merely a matter of scheduling or presence. It is an energetic offering, a willingness to be penetrated by the needs, demands, and unconscious pulls of others. We offer our emotional landscape to be traversed by others' storms. We permit our time, our space, our very essence to be colonized by obligations that do not arise from the core of our being. And in doing so, we often drift far from the coordinates of the self, pulled into the gravitational fields of lives we were never meant to orbit. But then something changes. A stillness grows inside, often first as weariness, as the soul whispering its fatigue through the bones, then perhaps through heartbreak or awakening, or the soft erosion of overextension. One steps back, withdraws, becomes unavailable. And in this unavailability, not as a spiteful withholding but as a sacred preservation, a new architecture of existence starts to take shape. This concept may appear deceptively simple, as if one is merely declining calls or saying no more often. But beneath the surface lies a metaphysical reorientation. Jung understood that we are not merely individuals making choices in a vacuum. We are fields of consciousness embedded in a vast psychic ecosystem. Every act of withdrawal from entanglement reshapes the psychic boundaries around us. When we cease being unconsciously available, others are forced, perhaps for the first time, to confront their own projections. The invisible scaffolding of codependency, expectation, and control begins to crack. To stop being available is not to become cold or cruel. It is to cease leaking soul. It is a return to the self as sacred center. And in that return, a hidden alchemy begins to unfold. Suddenly, you are no longer the predictable character in someone else's script. You have stepped outside the frame, and the scene begins to fall apart or reconfigure. That is the quiet, explosive power of absence. Jung would speak of individuation, the process by which the self emerges from the collective shadow, as something akin to becoming whole in one's solitude. Availability to the world, when unconscious, is often a mask worn by the fragmented self, desperate to remain needed so as to avoid its own hollowness. But when one becomes unavailable in service to truth, a deeper integrity awakens. There is something cosmic in this act. It is like the moon retreating behind clouds, pulling tides into strange silence. The ocean does not resent the moon for its withdrawal. It merely shifts. Likewise, the dynamics of your life, relationships, roles, routines, begin to undulate differently when you stop offering your essence as endlessly accessible. Some will rage, others will vanish, and a few, the rare few, will begin to rise toward you in genuine connection. Stripped of pretense, the energy once dissipated in endless availability now consolidates within. It becomes presence, depth, intuition. You begin to feel time stretch in new ways. The breath deepens. Inner voices once drowned in noise start to speak again. And in this internal flowering, the world around you changes, not because it actually alters, but because you are no longer consenting to distort its shape with your availability. You are no longer sustaining illusions that were never yours to hold. Jung's vision of the psyche was never a static map but a living terrain. The moment you step back, you stop feeding the unconscious machinery of others. You end the invisible contracts that have kept your soul hostage. And so, like tectonic plates long locked beneath the sea, the self begins to move, disrupting, revealing, creating. What appears as disappearance is, in truth, emergence. You disappear from the false to return to the real. You stop being available to the hollow so that you might become a vessel for the holy. In this light, withdrawal is not rejection but consecration, not escape, but return. And thus, in the echo of your absence, a new presence begins to sing. It is here that everything changes, not out there, but in the architecture of how you relate to everything out there. So begins the journey. As we move deeper into the terrain of Jung's insight, when you stop being available, everything changes. We begin to discern the foundational energies and ideas that underpin this transformative shift. It is not merely psychological. It is mythological, archetypal, and even alchemical. The very soul structure of availability must be deconstructed to grasp the immensity of what is truly being surrendered, and what is then born. To begin, we must recognize that availability, in its unexamined form, is often tethered to the archetype of the martyr or the rescuer. These figures do not arise randomly but are forged in the crucible of childhood, culture, and the unconscious inheritance of generational wounds. The martyr makes themselves perpetually open, ever sacrificing, believing that love is earned through depletion. The rescuer confuses purpose with intrusion, swooping in to solve, to mend, to hold up others while neglecting their own crumbling foundation. Both operate under a profound illusion that to be needed is to be loved, and to be absent is to be forgotten or abandoned. Jung's work constantly returned to the idea of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by the world. Availability often clings to this mask, using it as a tool for validation. But the persona is not the self. It is a performance given in the theater of the social realm. And when it becomes too tightly fused to our identity, we lose touch with the deeper layers of the psyche. So, the moment you stop being available, stop wearing that mask, the world no longer recognizes you in the way it once did. And in that confusion, deeper truths can finally surface. This disruption opens the doorway to individuation, which Jung described as the process by which one becomes their true self. Not the self that was shaped to meet others' needs, but the self that emerges from the integration of both light and shadow. And it is here, in the refusal to be endlessly accessible, that the shadow is first confronted. Why were you so available? What were you avoiding within yourself by being absorbed in others? What fear, what emptiness, what ache was being anesthetized by saying yes when your soul cried no? Individuation is a path of fierce honesty. It demands that we withdraw projections, our need to be seen as good, helpful, generous, selfless, and reclaim those energies as seeds of something more authentic. In this light, becoming unavailable is not a rebellion but a refinement. It is a symbolic death of the false self, a severing of ties to the masks that kept you in a state of spiritual anemia. The transformation, however, does not occur in a vacuum. The world you once supported with your availability may tremble or retaliate. Friends may fall away, partners may resist. Systems that relied on your constant engagement will attempt to reassert control. This is not cruelty, but inertia, the psychic equivalent of Newton's laws. That which was sustained by your unconscious participation will resist your awakening. But this resistance is the greatest teacher. It reveals where your false allegiances once lived. It shows you the cords you still need to cut. Another theme Jung returned to often is the idea of synchronicity, the causal connecting principle that suggests events in the outer world mirror the movements of the inner world. When you become unavailable to illusion, illusion begins to dissolve around you. Coincidences occur, people shift, paths once obscured appear. The reality around you begins to echo the truth within you. This is not magic, but the reweaving of energetic coherence. You are no longer living in contradiction. Your boundaries, your choices, your presence, they all begin to align with the deeper architecture of your psyche. The psyche, Jung believed, is a self-regulating system that seeks wholeness. And so, when you cease bleeding your essence into situations that drain you, the system begins to reconfigure itself toward healing. Dreams become more vivid. Inner symbols emerge. You may experience a resurgence of intuition, creative insight, or spiritual vision. These are not side effects. They are signals. Signals that the true self is rising through the rubble of your former roles. But there is also grief. Grief for the self you abandoned for so long. Grief for the years of compliance, of being present in rooms that dulled your light. Grief for the love you thought you had to earn with your availability. This grief is sacred. It is the mourning of the false life. And within its ashes lies the gold of transformation. It is also worth noting that in Jungian terms, the movement away from blind availability is a reclamation of the animus or anima, the inner masculine or feminine principle that guides one toward autonomy and intuitive wisdom. As these inner figures are integrated, one no longer seeks validation externally. The need to be wanted, to be chosen, to be accepted dissolves into a new sovereignty, the self choosing itself. Ultimately, what Carl Jung invites us into is not merely a withdrawal from the world, but a re-entry into the soul's true orbit. When you stop being available to everything, you become available to something much greater, the guiding intelligence within. You align not with noise, but with signal, not with expectation, but with essence. This is the core of it all. Becoming unavailable is not an act of negation, but a turning toward wholeness. It is a purification, a shedding, a kind of psychic fasting that prepares the soul for richer nourishment. The external world does not understand this at first. It may rage or recoil, but eventually, the world bends to your new frequency, and that frequency is truth. Let us now enter the mythic terrain, where the psyche speaks not in declarations or treatises, but in symbols, dreams, and ancient archetypal rhythms. The act of stepping away, of becoming unavailable, is not a modern self-help tactic. It is a ritual echoed across cultures, ages, and mythologies. Its roots wind through the bedrock of our collective unconscious, where the soul has always known that to disappear from the surface is to reappear in the depth. It is the old story retold in infinite forms. The hero vanishing from the village, the initiate descending into the underworld, the hermit entering the forest. Each tale is a mirror, inviting us to understand that becoming unavailable is a rite of passage. Imagine, for a moment, a well, not a modern fountain with glass walls and LED lights, but a deep, ancient well made of stone, its mouth forgotten by the world, overgrown with ivy and time. You are this well, or rather, your soul is. And for years, people have come to draw from you, some with reverence, many without. They've lowered buckets fashioned of need, manipulation, projection, expectation. Each time, you've allowed it. Each time, a little more of your inner water has risen to meet their demands. But now, the rope is cut, the bucket falls, but there is no response. You have stopped being available. The surface mourns. Below, something stirs. For the first time, the water no longer depletes. It deepens. It begins to shimmer with forgotten reflections, truths lost in the noise of being perpetually open. This is what withdrawal does. It thickens the soul. It allows the interior to gestate. In myths, this is the moment when the initiate disappears into the cave. Think of the Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree, unavailable to all but the truth of existence. Think of Christ retreating into the desert, facing temptations and visions. Think of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, descending into the underworld, shedding one garment at each gate until she stands naked before her shadow. These are not religious dogmas. They are soul patterns. They are metaphors for the exact process Jung gestured toward. When the self stops being available to the surface world, it enters the liminal space where transformation can truly occur. The forest is another symbol. Deep, tangled, ancient, where time dissolves and language turns to whisper. Those who enter the forest in story are never the same when they emerge. And yet the forest does not call the busy, the distracted, or the over-available. It calls the soul that has reached the threshold, the soul that has said, enough. Only in the forest can the voice of the true self be heard again. Becoming unavailable is, in this light, entering the forest within. Jung spoke often of the shadow, the unacknowledged aspects of the self, repressed into darkness. Availability, when unexamined, often serves as a convenient cloak to avoid the shadow. If I am needed, we say to ourselves, I do not have to feel the ache of my own aloneness, my rage, my hunger. But when we become unavailable, the cloak falls, and what rises to meet us may be terrifying. A neglected grief, a voice that says we've been lying to ourselves, an image of the life we could have lived had we only stopped sooner. This confrontation is the dragon at the cave's mouth, the sphinx on the desert road. And it is essential. No transformation occurs without first meeting what we have denied. Yet not all that emerges from withdrawal is monstrous. Often, the soul sends forth forgotten allies, dreams that flicker like fireflies, long-lost desires returning like old friends. This is the great paradox. When you stop being available to the world within you begins to speak. And it speaks not in commands but in stories, images, and moods. You begin to remember who you were before you became what others needed. Let us consider the cocoon. The caterpillar, sensing a shift, becomes unavailable, not symbolically, but entirely. It ceases to feed, spins silk, and dissolves within. There is no halfway metamorphosis. Inside the chrysalis, it liquefies, becomes unrecognizable even to itself. This is not merely beautiful. It is violent, raw, sacred. The world may wonder where the caterpillar has gone. It may tap on the cocoon, whispering, "Come back, we need you." But the process cannot be interrupted. The creature must stay in that sacred enclosure until it remembers its wings. In this way, becoming unavailable is not just an act. It is a phase of soul evolution. It is cocoon time. And just as the caterpillar does not know what it will become, neither do we. We withdraw without guarantees, trusting that something deeper is orchestrating the transformation. Consider also the archetype of the wise old man or wise woman. The crone, the hermit, the oracle. These figures are never found in crowds. They live on the edge of the village, in the mountain hut, the forest cave. People journey to them, often after long pilgrimages. They do not advertise their availability. Their wisdom requires seekers to rise into effort, into intention. And when they speak, it is not to please but to illuminate. To stop being available is to begin the journey toward becoming such a figure. To carry presence instead of accessibility. To emanate depth instead of attention. These stories and symbols show us that becoming unavailable is not abandonment. It is initiation. It is the death of the false identity and the rebirth of the soul's authority. It is the crossing of a threshold that cannot be undone. The hero never fully returns. Even when they re-enter the world, something in them remains aligned with the silence they discovered. That silence becomes their compass. And their compass, in time, becomes their gift to others. Not given freely, not offered endlessly, but shared with intention and boundary. Thus, the mythic realm confirms what the psyche already knows. When you stop being available, you are not ending something. You are beginning. You are not rejecting life. You are listening to it more closely. And in doing so, you are re-entering the sacred story of your own becoming. So how do we, in the midst of morning commutes, buzzing phones, unrelenting inboxes, and the silent expectations of those closest to us, bring this ancient inner alchemy into daily life? How do we step back without vanishing completely? Reclaim our center without descending into isolation? The truth is, the invitation to stop being perpetually available does not demand that you abandon the world. It asks only that you return to it from a place of sovereignty. In practical terms, this means becoming exquisitely discerning. Not every knock on the door requires an answer. Not every text requires a reply. Not every drama deserves your presence. There is power in the pause, in the breath held before you respond. This is not about cold detachment, but sacred preservation. When you stop being endlessly accessible, you begin to live with intent. You begin to cultivate what Jung might call a centered presence, a field of energy that is still and alert, capable of love without dissolving, of empathy without depletion. Boundaries, then, are no longer walls of defense but altars of self-respect. They say, "This is where I begin and you end, not because I reject you, but because I have come to know myself." This is the real-world gift of Jung's insight. It reconfigures how we move through relationships. We no longer seek to be needed in order to be seen. Instead, we become choosers of connection. We no longer confuse sacrifice with love. Instead, we learn to give from a well that has been replenished by stillness. Imagine walking into your home after a long day. You've turned off notifications. You've said no to one more obligation. You light a candle, or open a book, or simply sit in the quiet. In that moment, you are choosing the sacred over the urgent. You are tending to the fire within. rather than fanning the chaos without. These small moments of intentional unavailability are not selfish. They are the heartbeat of all genuine power. In the workplace, this might look like setting clear hours, saying no with grace, honoring your energy as a finite, sacred resource. In relationships, it may mean walking away from dynamics where your presence is only valued for what it gives, not for who you are. With family, it could mean redefining roles, shedding the identity of the fixer, the pleaser, the one who is always there. These changes may shake the foundations, but only the false ones. What remains after the tremor is what was always meant to stay. And yet, with all of this, there must be compassion for yourself and for those who have known only the old version of you. They may not understand your shift. They may resist, accuse, even mourn. But transformation rarely comes with applause. Often, it arrives through quiet rupture, through soft yet seismic refusal. Do not fear this. The soul has always spoken in the language of necessity. The change you embody through becoming unavailable begins to ripple outward. Others feel it, though they may not know what they're sensing. You move differently. You speak from deeper ground. Your presence becomes magnetizing, not because it is accessible, but because it is authentic. You are no longer broadcasting constantly. You are transmitting selectively. And in doing so, you invite others to do the same. You become not a savior, but a signal. The old paradigms, the ones that equated value with productivity, love with sacrifice, presence with performance, begin to fall away. And in their place, something ancient returns. A rhythm, a wisdom, a kind of psychic breathing room. You begin to remember that availability was never meant to be a default setting. It was meant to be a gift. As the cycles of your life realign, you will notice a clearing. Not everything or everyone can remain in your orbit. But what stays, stays with depth. What enters, enters with resonance. And you, once scattered and porous, become whole again. The energy once spent on pleasing, proving, performing now feeds your creative fire, your inner sanctuary. You become the artist of your own life. You become mystery, not noise. And now, as we close the circle, we must return to where we began, not with the intellect, but with the soul. Carl Jung, in his lifelong exploration of the unconscious, was not merely offering theories. He was lighting torches for those lost in the labyrinth of modern life. His statement, "When you stop being available, everything changes," is not a slogan. It is a spell of reclamation. It is a whisper from the self, calling us back through the fog of obligation into the clarity of essence. In the stillness that follows unavailability, you hear it, the deeper rhythm, the voice beneath the noise, the soul long patient, long waiting. It says, "Now at last, we can begin." This journey is not one of escape, but of return. Not a disappearance, but a reappearance in true form. When you stop being available to everything, you become available to what truly matters. Your purpose, your intuition, your authentic voice. You become a vessel for clarity instead of chaos, for wisdom instead of performance. Let this be your sacred rebellion. Let it be your descent into the forest, your cocoon time, your refusal to betray yourself one more moment. Let it be the quiet revolution that transforms not only how you live, but how you are. The world does not need more availability. It needs more presence, more depth, more truth. This is your invitation to step out of the noise and into the knowing. To vanish not into silence, but into meaning. To stop being everything for everyone, so you can finally become you. And now the choice is yours.